This is the second video about the initial chat with the recruiter. I've reached out to Luke, a very experienced recruiter who talked to hundreds and hundreds of candidates. In this interview, Luke will talk about the most common mistakes he sees candidates make, what the best candidates do during the interview process, and what you can do if you deal with a bad recruiter. I believe Luke's answers and insights are invaluable to your interview preparation and will give you a huge advantage when you are preparing for your next interview. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into the conversation. So yeah, thank you very much, Luke, for joining us. I think it's super helpful to speak to a recruiter. And I have prepared a few questions you might answer for the candidates in their job interview process. But maybe you can start with a quick introduction.
Yeah, sure. So, hello, I'm Luke. I've been a technical recruiter for 15 years, all in a technical space. Started out in DevOps and infrastructure, software, and then into sort of go-to-market, mainly working with hyperscaling tech companies. So my current role is to embed into these hyperscaling businesses, set up their TA function, get them stood up from a functional perspective, make sure they hit those targets, and just improve the recruitment functions of the business and the candidate experience, things like that. Been doing that for 15 years, and it's a fun job.
Cool. Thank you. Let's dive right into the first question. And I'm curious, what are the most common things you see candidates do wrong when interacting with recruiters?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good opening question, right? So the main thing is a mentality. So I think there's a lot of bad recruiter stories out there, and people have the assumption that recruiters are, particularly if they're in an agency environment and they're not internal recruiters, they're somehow in it for themselves, or they're in it for a fee, and they will lie to you essentially. And I'm sure there's some recruiters out there that are like that. But most recruiters, particularly if they're internal, they are really on your side. They're the only person in the business who is your advocate. Like they are your seat at the table when it comes to every step of the process. They are advocating on your behalf. So it's kind of like having a buddy all the way through the process if you have a good recruiter. So I think the biggest mistake you can make is kind of like a me versus you mentality. Because what kind of behaviors does that drive in the screen? You're going to be a little bit cagey. You're going to not give all of the information that you would like. You may be not clear with your salary expectations. You may be not clear with the work that you've done. Well, what happens if you're going through a process and both parties aren't quite clear with basic expectations? It's not going to end well, is it? It's only going to end. It's only going to end badly. So just changing a mentality and just seeing your recruiter as like your partner inside of the business. And as soon as you have that mentality, everything changes. So then you can start to you'll communicate with the recruiter more. You'll be more clear with your expectations. You'll and things like that are going to be really helpful. On top of that, so let's say that's the main thing. Change your mentality. Work with your recruiter like they're your advocate, like they're your lawyer. You work with them in that way. But also, I think candidates can be a little too passive. They'll maybe not ask all the questions that they need. It's a two-way thing, right? So if there's a bunch of expectations that you have of the company, it's really important to get those basic expectations out of the way in the first call. Because if you're at the offer stage and you've gone through 2 months of hard work or stress, and you've been saying to your partner, oh, this case study's stressing me out, all those things, and then only at the end find out something doesn't meet your basic expectation, what a waste of effort and stress. So just make sure that you are clear with your expectations, and then make sure that you ask all the questions that you need to qualify the role for yourself, not just you to the business. So they're the two main things: change mentality and be a little bit more assertive in your questioning and your expectations.
Yeah, perfect. I think for me, it's also that I always say the recruiters, they're on your side and use their support. They have so much knowledge. They have really insights into the business. So using their support is actually one of the most important things, I think, as a candidate going through the interview process. Now, on the other side, what are things you see the best candidates do during the interview process?
What I find the candidates that do the best through the process is they're really easy and open and enjoy talking about their previous experience and talking about their current projects, so they can communicate their work quite clearly. And they have, on top of that, they have a good understanding of the impact of their work. outwit to that of an individual contributor. And this gets more and more important as you become more senior in technology. Not just saying, I think engineers in particular get really good at explaining the technical details of what they've done. Okay, fine. How did that impact your team? How did that impact the feature you were building? How did that impact the customer? What about the bottom line of the business? So, and you have to sort of get into the habit of thinking about impact, not just outcomes. So the best candidates can do that. They have you have a really good rapport when someone's quite happy and talking about something they love, right? So relax, the recruiter's on your side, talk about your work in a way that you would talk about with your friends, right? But then also be mindful of, well, what was the impact of that? So yes, we built this feature. What did the customers have to say about that? What did the engineering director think? Or how did that help the product managers? What did that open up new avenues or whatever? So I think the best candidates tend to communicate their work pretty well. Again, they're pretty clear with their goals for the process and open with their expectations, and they ask plenty of questions. So they're the main things where I come off of a pre-screen call with a candidate and I think, I can't wait to put this person in touch with this stakeholder because they're going to get on like a house on fire, because they're both going to enjoy talking about their work and they're going to really dig into and build a good rapport as two engineers would. So I would say that's probably a good sign of a good candidate at that stage.
Great answer. I totally agree that being open and being engaged and asking all the questions gives you also all the tools to later be successful in the interview process. I remember that when you're talking to recruiters, they know all the insights and also about the interview steps and also about the people interviewing you, so they can give you a lot of advice beforehand to prepare, right?
Absolutely. And one other thing on that actually is which you kind of sparked in my head was, when you're talking about your projects, that's an open question. So they're gathering information. And without that first step going well, it's more difficult for the recruiter to then have more closed questions to qualify what you've said. So if you're not particularly good or you're not particularly well practiced at communicating openly all the work that you've done, it becomes harder job for the recruiter to then pull out the specific qualifying information you need to get to the next stages or to deliver to the stakeholders and things like that. So it really does help when you're open like that, because it kind of is a sympathetic relationship. It makes it easy for the recruiter, which makes it easier for you.
In the danger that I already asked a similar question and you will ask a similar thing, my next question would be, which advice do you give commonly to people you wish they would take more seriously during the interview process?
Oh, I hope you've got 2 hours, Leonard. No, so the main pet peeve of most recruiters in my teams that I've coached, and me personally when I recruit, is we always say you should prepare for an interview, and it's very rare that preparation is done in the way that you would prepare for a retrospective, right, or a demo. What goes through your mind when you're doing a retrospective and a demo the day before? What goes through your mind, when you're also being told prepare for an interview? So people tend to just put aside like kind of 45 minutes before the interview to prep. No, preparation means preparation. And so what I would say is put some time into your calendar to prepare for the interview. This is my prep time. Research the company, the brief of whatever interview you're in. So at a later stage, what's the brief of is it a technical interview? Is it a behavioral thing? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a case study? Whatever. Study the brief and make sure that you've got some clear understanding. Start making notes to sort of clarify all of and kind of curate what's in your mind. Look up the key stakeholders on LinkedIn. Where did they used to work? If there's a key stakeholder that's just come straight out of Amazon, straight off the bat, all of their leadership principles. You know exactly what they believe, right? Just from the previous companies, or if they come from a consultancy or wherever. So that's really useful information that helps you sort of deliver yourself to these types of people. And then anything about their features, any new tools, and anything that's in their blogs that they're going to be excited and interested to talk about, because that's their baby. So preparation is really the main thing that people don't take seriously enough. They think they've prepared, but they've not. they need to put more significant effort into that. And lastly on that, on the sort of the brief and whatnot, the note taking is really, really important. You may have been in an interview yourself where they ask you a question that's so open that about 50 answers enter your head at the same time. And then what comes out of your mouth is sort of like a soup of sort of some of this answer, some of that answer, and you look back and think that actually wasn't, I didn't really give a good representation of myself. When you take notes and you prepare, it's a linear thing taking notes. It's not as multifactorial as it is up in your head. So it forces you to sort of curate the best answers, even if you just have a subtitle, or you don't have to type everything out, but just a bit of note taking just helps you calm your brain down for the interview. It helps you curate your thoughts, and it makes you feel more confident. So I really think preparation is the thing that people need to take more seriously.
I love the answer, because you summarized the whole purpose why I create this whole interview video series. If people take one thing away, I would say, like, you need to prepare and actually also practice your answers, as you said, because sometimes we write it down and it sounds super good on paper, but the first time you speak it out loud, it doesn't sound as good as you thought it would sound. And on that side, I also think that the preparation time you spend is so little compared to your actual career you're building. You need to spend so few hours to have a huge impact on the opportunities you get, on the salaries you get, etc. Right? So that is the reason why I create this video series.
Yeah, actually, one last thing though, because you tend to sort of say something that sparks my brain off again. When you were talking about the preparation, and it is sometimes it doesn't read well, that is an important piece as well. And this is getting more into presentation skills rather than interview prep. But if some people will maybe overscript, and if the answers are scripted, they will always be a little bit wooden, because you're not using the part of your brain that presents to confer information. You're reading out information. So I always find it's good to kind of have it almost like if it was an index card. Like put your answer in the write down your answer in the form of a topic, like a topic heading. That's what you write down, and then you rehearse the topic in your head. So that way that you can read the topic heading quick as a flash in the middle of the interview, and then you can go to that part of your brain where you've prepared it up here. And that's how you kind of, I believe, get the best sort of benefit of note taking to fluid presentations. It's a common thing. You probably see a lot of after dinner speakers with index cards for the exact same reason. So it's just a presentational hack for your audience there.
Mm-hmm. Coming to the next question, what are some common questions you ask to candidates, and they really need to have a good answer during this first chat with a recruiter?
That's a good question, and we're getting into a topic where it could be very broad. So it depends on the role. It depends on the type of recruitment process. So some pre-screen interviews can be quite relaxing and just a kind of a pre-qualifying session. So just have good answers to things like your salary expectations, your working format, the standard stuff you can probably think of. But let's work on the assumption, because it'll probably be higher value for your audience, that there's going to be a component of qualifying your skills, experience, and things like this. When it comes to the common questions I would ask, it's not so much a question, it's more the open questions that they need a good answer to. So going back to being able to describe your work well is what you need to be able to have a good answer to. So if I ask you, what have you currently been working on, and you can't accurately articulate what you've been doing for the past 6 months, then even if what you've been doing for the past 6 months has been high caliber, has been valuable, well, you're going to have to essentially do the same thing, but to an engineering manager in a week's time. And what's going to happen then if you can't communicate? So I would say it's not so much a question, it's more the common question that I would ask is the open questions. What have you been working on? What I would say you also need to have a good answer to in the initial chat is anticipate any of the closed questions. So if you're saying, if you just said, I've just spent the past 6 months and I've been working on these really complex sort of front end things, and then someone asks you a basic question about front end technology and you fumble and you can't quite articulate it, that's another sort of a red flag. So think to yourself, you're in control of what you say. So if I think to myself, like, how am I going to explain the past 6 months of what I do? How am I going to sell the amazing work I've done for the past 6 months to a year? Then almost be your own devil's advocate and say, right, how would I challenge that information? And then come up with the answers to those questions as well. So if you're saying, I've just built this, I work for some airline and I've built some booking tool and it's got 1 million users a month. Cool. Like, I want to know about, how you think about scalability. I want to know how you think about user interactions. How close are you to customers? How do you get feedback? How do you work with other teams? All of that curiosity is going to, as a technical recruiter, I'm going to want the answers to those questions. So just prepare for the answers to those questions and you're going to sound amazing. So I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I'm quite, that was a good question. Does that answer your question quite well, or?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it ties back to, again, like preparing, finding actually the key things you want to say, also practicing it. But also now you triggered one thought in me, which was that I think the best interviews, they become conversations, right? There is not this static question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, where it becomes really stiff and not really a good flow, right? And what you just described is really coming into giving a broad an answer where the recruiter then can spark the curiosity and continue on and learn more, right? And then it becomes really interesting for both sides. And usually, if you're prepared, and especially if you're talking about the project you have worked on, you know a lot and you can talk a lot about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely it. And lastly, it's just about, I think a lot of candidates try to they not BS their way through something, but they try to talk about things that maybe they don't have as much experience in. I'd rather someone talk about, let's say they feel they only meet 80% of the criteria. Okay, talk in detail about that 80% and don't try to fumble your way through that 20%. If anything, just tell them how you would go about learning that 20%. That's quite key. I think a lot of, you can be in a high pressure situation when you're in an interview and you can sort of think, I need to show my best self, and that self-defeating, where you end up talking out of your wheelhouse. Just stick to what you know, explain it really well. That's the best way to get yourself across well.
Perfect. Okay, let's come to the last question I have for you. Sometimes you find a company you really love, you really think this is a great company, I want to work there, and you start researching them, you go on their website, you find good open positions, you apply, but maybe the recruiter is not reaching out. It takes ages until you get the first email. And even after you had the recruiter chat, the communication is somehow not working and you really get upset, right? So my question is, what can candidates do when they deal with a bad recruiter, but they still really want to work at this company?
I absolutely love this question. This is the favorite question anyone's asked me like all year. I've been really forward to answering this question. It's so insightful. So it's common, right? Recruitment is the top of the funnel where all the recruiters are. That's where the highest volume is. And there are a lot of recruiters who maybe are very junior and they don't have a good understanding of candidate experience yet. Or recruitment companies may not actually have very much strategic leadership when in recruitment. So their processes tend to be very backwards and not very candidate centric. And I'm sure everyone's been in that situation, right? The exact situation you just described. So if you're in a situation where you've applied for a role and it's taken a long time and so on, there's no harm in, first of all, that's probably due to either a high volume of applications or a recruiter who has poor time management and not getting back to you for some reason. So it's good to be a little bit more assertive. So reach out to the recruiter on LinkedIn or on their email and just ask them, look, I've applied, really interested in the role. Have you got time for a chat? And then that they're either going to make the decision to pre-screen you because that's what you've asked for, or they have to get back to you with a rejection there and then because you've emailed them straight away and you've essentially given them the sort of the knife edge of, do you want a pre-screen or do you want to reject me? Just tell me now. So if it is just a matter of waiting a long time for a recruiter to get back to you, it's well worth just reaching out to the recruiter after, I don't know, 5 days or something like that if they don't get back to you. I mean, my SLAs in my teams is always 24 hours, 48 hours max before someone gets back to you with a decision. And it just keeps the throughput sort of high and everything happening. But not all companies are like that. So yes, if it's been about a week or so, reach out to the recruiter yourself via email or LinkedIn and just ask them, like, interested in the role, have you got time for a chat? And then they kind of have to essentially make the decision whether they want to accept your application, put it forward, or reject you. If you're in a pre-screen with a recruiter, and all of what we've been discussing in this chat isn't happening, maybe the recruiter's not going into detail in your background, it's more of a casual chat, they're asking you kind of weird and wonderful questions. I once heard a recruiter say, like, what's your favorite blog, to someone, and they hadn't asked them like what work they've been doing, and you think, well, what information is that person gathering and taking towards the business? If you're in a situation where you feel, yeah, the recruiter maybe isn't really getting everything from you that you need, then again, feel free to be assertive and just say, look, is there anything about my current projects that you would like to hear about? Is there anything that's relevant to this job description that you would like to hear about? And also, you can use your questions to your advantage. So you can always preload information in your questions. So for instance, let's say the role requires a certain level of interaction with the product management team, and you're responsible for sort of being that liaison between sort of product and an engineering team, for example. Well, you can always say, in my current role, I've been responsible for liaising with the product team. I find it quite enjoyable. How much of that will I be doing in this team? So you can even start giving information about yourself through the questions that you ask them. So the TL related DR is assertive. Be more assertive. If there's the recruiter that's not getting you what you want, you go get what you want. Either get in touch with the recruiter or give them the information that you know they need. But hopefully that's going to be the minority. You won't get as many recruiters not being that professional. I think a lot of the time it's just junior recruiters rather than poor recruiters, in my experience. But I hope that helps answer the question.
I think especially when people really want to work in a company, sometimes you send many applications and get also rejections here and there. But I think sometimes we put our focus on one or two companies where we really want to work at, and I think then being more assertive is super helpful.
Actually, on that, it's a kind of slightly off the brief that you gave me in the question, but I think valuable is, if you've not applied for it, if there is one or two of those companies that you really like, but there aren't any vacancies, but you like the company, then it's still valuable. It's still worth speculatively reaching out to those organizations, not through HR or TA recruitment, because they're dealing with live roles. But essentially, if there's a company out there that you'd love to work for and you're thinking about making a move in the next year, then feel free to be assertive with your job search. So reach out to the hiring managers or the engineering managers, engineering directors of the company, of the bits of the company that you like the look of. Just reach out to them on LinkedIn, send a connection and say, be totally honest, I really like the look of your company. I'd love to work for you at some point in the future. Here's an up-to-date copy of my CV. If anything aligns just now, more than happy to have a chat. And one of three things is going to happen. You're going to get ignored, so you lose nothing. It didn't cost you anything. They're going to get back to you and say, we've not got anything right now, but you're going to live in that person's mind. You've made a connection with a very key stakeholder for the future. Or they'll get back to you and say, oh, actually, someone resigned yesterday. The role's not open yet, but why don't we get you in for a chat, and you get access to those roles that haven't gone live yet. Or there could be budget for a role like you in Q3, but now that you've turned up and just landed on their plate without any costs to them, they can speak to finance, maybe front load some of that budget into Q2, get you on board sooner. So don't think it's just a matter of like open jobs or nothing. It's about business need. And if you're in a growing business, if you're working in a hyperscaling business, there's always a need for good skills. So that's the last sort of thing, is that, feel free to be assertive in the marketplace outside of just job vacancies.
That was my last question, Luke. Thank you very much for giving us so much insights into the side of a recruiter. Is there anywhere where people can reach out to you if they want to talk to you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. Best place for all my sort of long form content is on LinkedIn. So you can get me at Luke Eaton just on LinkedIn. And I post about nerdy recruitment stuff and nerdy techie stuff and sort of the blend of the two. So if you're interested in any of that, I've got plenty of articles out there and feel free to just jump on comments and say hi. I just like having conversations with clever people like yourself.
Perfect. Thank you very much for taking time today to share your perspective, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye. I think the insights Luke just shared with us are extremely helpful when going through your own interview process. As you heard, if you want to reach out to Luke, I will leave his LinkedIn link in the description of this video and you can connect with him there. I hope this conversation was helpful. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments of this video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.